over these last months, in the forging of the previous link in this seeming never-ending chain of stories, a number of the stories that were told were Sufi stories. And as has already been said, it's been found with the Sufi stories that they most clearly contain the 4 levels of stories. And a number of them, of course, are allegorical in nature. But we know from that there's an alchemy with all stories, and the alchemy of the Sufi stories, to my experience, is that they effectively bring together in us all of the elements of the stories that are part of our psyche. So there's an integrative process that occurs in ingesting these stories. And not only that, they bring the possibility of unifying, emulsifying, you could say, those 3 levels of existence: the nitty-gritty area of cause and effect, the intuitive, dream, creative level, the occult level, and that level of interrelatedness. So you could say, with the beginning of the forging of this new link in the chain, we have indeed reached that place of integration of the facets of our psyche, and an integration and melding of the 3 levels of life, so that they can no longer be fragmented. Not fragmented, no pieces anymore. All right, it may be a holograph, but it's whole. So there was a story told on Sunday that really leads us into this next link in our chain, using the same semantics. Now we know that we're at the changing of an age, and there's very good reason why we've come to integration at this time. But there are stories from another time, and that time was when Buddhism was just arising, you could say being birthed out of Hinduism. And at that time a great number of great souls were on earth. And those great souls integrated the essence of the past, or you could say Hinduism and all that it represented, and the new, demonstrated in the ways of powers which are called siddhis. So there are a number of what are called siddha stories, and they're stories of these souls. And one such story was told on Sunday, which perhaps will resonate with us now and lead us into another set of archetypes, symbols that are not related to the psyche. This story is the story about a great king, and he ruled over a kingdom that was called Gadaha. But unbeknown to the populace of that kingdom, their king had been initiated many years previously by a yogin into the Hevaraja lineage, and in his practices he'd attained great powers and a high degree of enlightenment. He ruled his kingdom very well, but it so happened that when he inherited this kingdom, it was fraught with karma. it was visited by pestilence, and it was invaded by armies, and there was often famines in the land. So, in order to alleviate this karmic debt, the king devised and ordered that a great brass bell be cast, and this bell was hung from a venerable old tree in the center of the city. Now we know the power of sound. So the king instructed his advisors that whenever it was seen that famine, pestilence, an invasion was about to take place, that they should ring this bell with all their might. And so they did. And so karma was alleviated. And not only this, because we know the power of sound, of resonance, the ringing of that bell purified the souls who inhabited that kingdom. But this kingdom was there at a time when the caste system was still very, very much adhered to as laws of the land. And one day a troop of what we would probably term gypsies came into the city. They were of the lowest caste, but they entertained the people, and word came to the king of their presence. So he invited them to his palace. And when they did, and during the course of the entertainment, the king was mesmerized, entranced by the beauty of one of the young beings, a beautiful, pure, 12-year-old girl, unsullied by the world. After the entertainment was over, the king found that she was the daughter of the head of that troop. So he called the head of the troop to him and asked for her hand, intending to make her his consort. The father of the maiden was aghast and said to the king, How can you break the laws of the land? We are of the lowest caste. But the king was adamant, and he ordered scales to be brought, and the girl was weighed. And the king put on the scales her weight in gold. So the father agreed to relinquish his daughter to the care of the king, to become his consort. It was kept secret for many years. In fact, it was 12 years, kept quiet. But then, as is the way with these things, it became known. And as soon as the populace at large learned of this union, they immediately demanded that the king abdicate from his rule for breaking the laws of caste. So the king and his consort left the palace in the care of the king's son. The king went off into the deep, deep forest and was not seen again. But the kingdom again descended into anarchy and pestilence. Invasions and famine again visited them. The great bell cracked and fell into disuse. The plight of the people was so great that they went and begged that their old king be found and asked to come back to the kingdom to rule. And so messengers were sent out, but he could not be found. But then, just as those messengers were about to abandon their search, one amongst them noticed that they had entered a part of the forest that was totally silent. There was no sound to be heard, not even the rustle of trees, nor the sound of birds. And as they progressed further into that, they saw their king sitting in lotus position under a great tree, and on a pond nearby his consort dancing on lotus leaves, dipping her hands in the water of the pond to bring up a nectar which she could bring to her monarch. The messengers were so awed by what they saw that they dare not interrupt this scene. So they returned to the palace and told of what their experiences. But immediately another group of messengers was sent with orders to beg the king to return to rule them. So the messengers went, and when they presented themselves to the king and told him of their plight, he said that he would return. And so the messengers went back to the palace. Some days later, 7 to be exact, people lined the road. They had a sense, an awareness. And the king came riding into the city on the back of a great pregnant tigress. Behind him sat his consort, and above his head he waved a live snake as a whip. People fell to the ground in awe and fear, in fact. But when the king addressed them, he said, "I will return to rule this kingdom if you will do as I have done." The people were aghast. They said, "How can we abandon the laws of caste? We are but ordinary men." But the king said, "If, because you cast me out, because I had broken the laws, this karma can be dealt with in the flames of a fire, I will consider ruling you once again." So a great bier was built, and the king and his consort were placed on the bier, and it was lit. The flames of that fire gave off a fragrance for 7 days and 7 nights, after which the fire burnt down, and there in the ashes sat the king and his consort in a great union, a physical union, before the awed people. They again bowed down, and again the king asked them, "If you can do what I have done, I will rule once again." But again the people stated, "How can we break the laws that have been in place?" And so before their very eyes, the king and his consort floated up into the ethers, never to be seen again. Siddha stories, unlike the Sufi stories, the Zen stories, the folk tales and the fairy tales, are true stories. As we move into this new link in our chain, can it be said that we have to let go our disbelief? Or is there no need, when the mind has already been purged of all conditioning, all possibilities, that the truth contained in these stories can be negated? When we realize this, we ourselves have been initiated and can accept the miracles, the siddhis that come unbidden and naturally in the place we now find ourselves. The Siddha stories are stories of the great souls who came at the changing of an age.